Today on Locked On Canadiens, we have your midseason report cards and your weekly forecast. Are the Canadiens going to be able to sustain the great play we've been seeing as of late this upcoming week?
Your Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, folks, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Canadiens. We want to quickly thank you all so much for making us your first listen of the day. As you know, we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, whether you win or lose that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is Laura Saba, also known as The Active Stick, and today, this is episode 1223, by the way. Joining me, as always, is the wonderful Ian Boisvert, also known as Maybe It's Ian. Ian, are we ready to do a forecast of the week and hand out some grades for the first half of the season?
Yeah. When you were a kid, Laura, was report card time? Were you worried when the report cards were coming out? Were you one of those kids? Yeah,
I was
I was
one of
kind
those
of in
kids.
the same boat. I did well in school, but I was always nervous that something bad was going to happen. I got a C in math once in like the 5th grade, and my mom grounded me for like a month. So,
That sounds like my mom too. I used to get good grades too, and I was always really anxious because the other thing too was that tied to good grades was always a treat, whether it was like a toy or like going
yeah,
out for ice cream or something like that. So I'd be mad that we get deprived of that. But we're not depriving the Canadians of their treats this time around. We're going to have some honest midseason report cards. But first, we have to get into our weekly forecast. There are 4 games on the schedule this week because the schedule never makes any sense. I don't even think that they had AI generated. I think they just threw a bunch of things like magnets at a board and saw what stuck.
yeah. If you've ever played, like I used to play a lot of the NHL games, and like you'd play like a franchise mode where the first season that you would play would be the correct full authentic NHL schedule, and then the next year you would simulate it and they would just make one up. And that's what
Yeah.
this season feels like, because I just keep thinking back to the Florida trip that they went, okay, you'll play both Florida teams and then you're going to Vegas for no reason.
Absolutely no reason.
That's sort of what this week feels like. But right before I get into the schedule that's coming up, I kind of want to point out why it's super important for the Canadiens this week, because we did our big show about how they were back in the playoffs. They probably spent one day back in the actual playoffs
It was
because
like 22 hours.
right, because every team around them is also winning right now. Montreal, as of this recording, they're 2 points back of the second wild card spot. We were talking about them getting one of the last wild card spot, but no, that's no longer true, because I think the 2 wild card spots are now in play, because Boston has been in free fall. Yes, they're playing a little bit better now, but Boston has 47 points with 45 games played. Columbus is in that second wild card, 46 points in 43 games. So the Bruins are barely hanging on, and they've played way more games than anybody else. So I think, if these teams, Columbus, Ottawa, Detroit, Montreal, Pittsburgh, even the Rangers and the Islanders and the Flyers aren't out of it. Like, there are a lot of teams here. There's 9 teams fighting for 2 spots. It's kind of nuts. So that's why this week is super important, and every week for the rest of the season until the Canadiens have either gotten in or have played themselves out of it. This is what we're playing for. So just, important to point out, Montreal sits 1 point back currently of the Columbus Blue Jackets for that second wildcard spot. So, like you said, 4 games this week, on the road for the first 2, at Utah for the first ever Montreal Canadiens game in Utah, and Thursday at Dallas, then back home Saturday against the Maple Leafs, Sunday against the Rangers. We've seen all 4 of these teams already this year. Montreal is, I guess they're 1-2-2 against them, because Dallas was a shootout loss. So yeah, not particularly successful, but a lot of those came in the early parts of the year where the Canadiens just weren't playing all that well. What are your thoughts just going into this week?
Ironically, the one they won in regulation was against Toronto.
Yeah, and Montembeault stood on his head.
Yeah. So what are my thoughts? Honestly, I'm going to say that I'm not nervous about this team. They have shown that they're capable of playing really well. I am a little bit worried about that Toronto game simply because something bad will happen. There will be shenanigans, and then all of Canada is going to have to talk about it for the next 2 days. And I don't want that, right? So I know we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about Utah because it's not a team that the Canadiens have seen all that much this season. Dallas, we just saw them, it's a good measuring stick. We want the Canadiens to come out strong against them. We want them to hang on with Dallas, whether it's another shootout or overtime loss, whether it's a win. We just want to see that they can hang, right? In terms of Toronto, I think that one is going to be one where they're going to really not just have to protect the puck, but protect themselves too. Overall. And then the Rangers is going to be really interesting because are they going to be able to take advantage of the Rangers that are still, we talked about how there are so many teams that were having struggling or in free fall or, they were circus and they're kind of recovering, right? Like Ottawa's recovering, Detroit is recovering. And then you're looking at the Rangers and they're not there yet. So are they going to be able to have, I'm going to say a word I haven't said in like 20 games, killer instinct?
Yeah.
Are they?
Yeah, they need it. Yeah, especially, and we'll start in Utah. I think that's going to be a perfect example of can they flex that muscle. Utah is 18, 17, and 7 for 43 points, 6 in the Central, 23rd in the National Hockey League, 2, 6, and 2 in their last 10 games. So like this is a weak opponent, an opponent that's coming in, licking their wounds a bit. Their special teams are almost exactly league average. Power play is 16th, penalty kill is 13th. They're right around mid in the NHL. Goaltending, you have one good goaltender and one very bad goaltender. Karel Vejmelka is a 916, 238 in 24 starts. And Connor Ingram is an 877 and a 349. So if you're hoping to get one of these goalies on Tuesday, you are hoping you are getting a Connor Ingram start if you're playing against the Utah Hockey Club. Offense, 25th in the league on a goals for per game. 13th in the league goals against. So I think those Karel Vejmelka games are kind of carrying them to that stat. For one thing I found that was kind of interesting about Utah, because I remember watching the first game that they played in Utah and thinking that it was a really cool environment that a team would probably, vibe off of. They're worse at home. And not even just like a little bit. They have half as many wins at home as they do on the road. 6, 9, and 4 at home, 12, 8, and 3 on the road. So I mean, they beat Montreal earlier this season in overtime. That was a road game for them. At home, they're not very good. So looking at an opportunity to pounce on a weak opponent there. Keller is a point per game player. Logan Cooley's not far behind, 36 and 42. My keys to the game here: protect the puck and pretend Utah just won a Stanley Cup, because that seems to be working if you play against a Stanley Cup champion and not the Chicagos of the world.
Right. And for me, it's really just a matter of, can you keep your foot on the gas for the whole game?
Yep. Dallas just played them. There's not really much to add there. Just, I think if they play the game that they played last time, they'll be in decent shape. Maybe start the game a little bit better. The first period was a little rough. I'd like to see fewer hits, because the hits mean that you are not in control of the puck. That was a problem in that Dallas game.
Yeah.
Toronto, 27, 15, and 2 for 56 points. First in the Atlantic, 5th in the National Hockey League. 1-0 win for Montreal in the season opener, 48 save shutout for Montembeault, and then a 4-1 loss in November. Their top 6 is incredible. Marner has 59 points. Nylander has 44. Tavares is right there with 41 and 42. Matthews only has 31 points, but that's in 29 games because he's been dealing with injuries. They're coming off of 2 straight losses, of I think a 6-3 loss to Carolina and a 3-0 loss to the Canucks. And the game before that, they won against Philadelphia. They were the second best team on the ice by far. For me, that the keys to that one: protect the puck. And if you contain the top 6, you're going to win that game, because their depth is not good enough to win if their best players are not their best players.
My key to that game is to pretend it's the playoffs. Honestly, don't get injured and pretend it's the playoffs is my big key to that Leafs game.
Yep. And then right back at it the following night at home against the New York Rangers, who are 20, 20, and 2 for 42 points, 6th in the Metro, 24th in the National Hockey League. 7-2 loss to the Rangers back in October, and then a 4-3 loss in Manhattan in November. That one, if you remember correctly, I have written next to it stolen. That was a stolen game for the New York Rangers. Montreal was the better team in that game, and the officiating completely jobbed Montreal out of at least 1 point and maybe 2. That I think if you're the Montreal Canadiens going into that game, you should feel like you can beat them if you are as angry as half of your fans were watching that game.
Yeah, absolutely. My keys to that game is that Josh Anderson should make a muffin basket and send it to each referee beforehand. I know you're not allowed to bribe them, but since they are incapable of right.
No. They all do. They're all getting signed sticks from Brad Marchand. No. They're all doing that. Matthew Tkachuk knows their phone numbers. There's no chance.
I'm just saying, they're incapable of following the rules when it's their job to actually follow the rules and enforce them. So I think it's fine if he sends them some muffin baskets, maybe some skincare products, hair products, things like that. I think that's the key. That's my key to the game. Also, just don't lose your head because you are going to be going into that game angry, like remembering that last game. But luckily, Jacob Trouba is not there anymore, so that is a positive for the Canadiens. So that's our weekly forecast. And as you know, we're in the midpoint of the season, and the Canadiens have given us a wealth of different experiences night in and night out. We're going to try and have a mid-season report card, trying to remember all the things that have happened and give them an accurate grade for this point of the season. That's coming up next. It's the NFL playoffs, which is one of the best times of the year. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose, with that first $5 bet. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. I honestly, the playoffs is when I start paying attention, and because it's so much fun to do all kinds of bets on the NFL. And you can do that as well. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's talk mid-season report cards. This is Randy Hansen reminded us we hadn't done one in the mailbag. And if you guys want to send us mailbag questions, you can reach us at lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. That's probably the best way to do it. But you can also leave them in the YouTube comments, reach out to us on Blue Sky, send it an Instagram DM. I think you can send DMs on TikTok too, whatever it is. But yes, you can reach us, send us mailbag questions. We do mailbag episodes every Friday. All right, Ian, where do you want to start? So I thought we could break it down in terms of like areas like front office, coaching, offense, defense, goaltending, special teams. What about your thoughts? Is there anything you want to add to that?
No, let's do it. I think the report card format gives us a lot of meat on the bone here. So, and it's a very we're essentially analyzing two teams, right? The first half of the year, it seems like, was two different teams for the Montreal Canadiens. We had the early, oh my God, I can't believe we have to watch this team all year phase. And now I can't wait to watch these guys every night phase. Yeah. So it's going to be weird to kind of lump those two teams into like singular grades, but I think it's worth a shot.
We have to be honest though, and that's the thing, because it sucks, because I would like to only do like end of November to now, because then it's like, we're giving them like B+ is the minimum grade they're getting, but no, we have to go to the beginning of the year. Yeah. And where would you like to start? I think for me, front office is the easiest one to get out of the way.
Yeah, and I mean they've been quiet, right? They haven't done much in the way of player movement. They waived Caden Primo. They brought up Jakub Dobeš, which has worked out not only for Jakub Dobeš and the Montreal Canadiens, but Caden Primo, who's down in the American Hockey League, playing some good hockey, which is not something he did a lot in Montreal. Like, he played once a month up here. It wasn't, it's not something that, was sustainable long term. But outside of that, the Justin Barron for Alex Carrier trade has, you've heard this 1,000 times, you'll hear it 1,000 more, has stabilized the Canadiens' back end. They feel way more confident now in their top 4 defensive players now than they did before Justin Barron was here, when he was still here, because they didn't feel confident in playing him. Carrier has given them so much confidence that just that in and of itself is a massive win for the Montreal Canadiens. So the front office has been quiet, but what they've done has been good. Yeah,
I agree. They made some hard decisions. And I think for me, the biggest one was not being married to Justin Barron, hook or by crook or whatever you call it. I don't know what the expression is, but you know what I mean, right? they weren't willing to eat that. They were willing to say, all right, this isn't working out. This might have been a player that we got or we asked for in the Lehkonen trade. It's like, we're going to stop trying to make fetch happen and we're going to switch it around. And for me, like from my perspective, I think, that was a tough decision to make. So I do want to give them a higher grade for that.
Yep. No, absolutely. And it was the right one. I think one thing that I can say definitively so far about Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton is they are not, blind to the issues that this roster has. One of the first trades that Kent Hughes had to make was he had to get another goalie, and he got Andrew Hammond just because he needed a goalie. They could not continue the way that they were going back then.
Yeah.
He saw they needed a right shot defenseman, so he went and found one. We need a different option in goal. Okay, I'm going to call up this guy. So, I think they are very attuned to not only what this market sees, but what is objectively right and wrong about their roster.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so let's talk about coaching. This one is a little bit interesting.
Yeah. I wrote down, when we were thinking about doing this, I wrote down classes that they took in the first semester, and one of them was the hybrid defense class, which, their instructors, Marty St. Louis and Stefan Robida, it was not looking great for them at the beginning of the year, but they stuck to it and it's worked. That system works now, and it works because the coaching staff did not shy away from it at the first sign of it not working. They stuck with it. And I think you look at the defense, most of the people that are there are going to be there for a while. So it's helpful to teach these guys this, like Lane Hudson, Caden Gooley, Jaden Struble to a certain extent, Arbor Xhekaj, like they're hoping all these guys are here for a long time. So, it means a lot that they were able to pick that up. And I think the coaching is, you cannot remove them from that equation. They are just as, if not more, responsible for these players figuring it out as the players are themselves.
Right. Absolutely. So I think for me, like, as a whole, if you're grading on improvement, then it's obviously night and day, right? So like you have to give them the kudos. Where I'm a little bit concerned is I'm not sure if at the beginning when it wasn't working out, I'm not sure if it was due to stubbornness or literally, things going wrong.
Yeah.
And it was out of the coaching staff's hands.
Yeah, it's tough we're not on the inside. It's tough to know.
Yeah.
But it did just seem like the defense didn't have a great grasp on it earlier this year. They really struggled to comprehend that system. I think they might have simplified it slightly, but I think that's more of an illusion in how they explain it to these players than it is, like baby proofing it, right?
Yeah.
I think it's more so the way that they explain this to a guy like Caden Gooley or a guy like Lane Hudson. But I also think, on the Caden Gooley side of things, I think the defense improved dramatically once he was playing on the correct side.
Yeah.
We always that's always going to be brought up with this first half for the Canadiens, is that most of it Caden Gooley was being forced to play a spot he's not good at. He doesn't like doing.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big part of it too.
So then defense as a whole.
Yeah, I think honestly, they've improved, they drastically since the start of this season. Even looking back at last year, what I find most interesting, especially in the last run of games, is the line that keeps coming back is that the point of defense is to stop defending. And they've gotten so much better at that. They're not defending. I was at that game on Long Island where they were stuck in the defensive zone for like 6 minutes, and we just couldn't believe what was happening. That was obviously an extreme example of that. But there were a lot of instances where it was really tough for them to get out of their zone and stop defending. They've gotten so much better at taking their opportunities to take the puck away and just moving out as quickly as possible. And their offense has benefited from that as well, because they're able to transition so much better now.
Absolutely. And so that brings us to the offense, because I do want to ask a couple questions at the end. So that brings us to the offense, and obviously goaltending we have to talk about as well. For me, I've been pretty happy with the offense, to be honest, because I thought that the bottom six came into place and found their place like very, very quickly. And I do think that, the people that you were relying on to produce were producing. I know we had a lot of issues with Kirby Doc and him like getting back into the swing of things, et cetera, et cetera. But that to me was kind of offset by the fact that Christian Dvorak and Josh Anderson became such integral parts of this offense. And I do think that Emma Heineman has been a revelation.
Yeah, no, me too. I think that the bottom six has been a massive part of the Canadiens' current success. But looking at the top, I mean, Nick Suzuki, he's over a point per game. He's 43 points in 42 games. He is exactly where we want him to be at this point in his career. And not far behind him is Cole Caulfield, 40 points in 42 games. We wanted 1 point per game player. We might end up with 2. we might end up with 3 if Lane Hutson can get really hot. He's got 32 and 42. So, that to me is the fact that we're getting that offense from the guys we want that offense from, and Lane Hutson, who just came out of nowhere.
Yeah. That's not to mention Patrick Laine. He's not playing a lot of games, but he's scoring in a lot of them.
He's played 14 games, and I think he has 11 points. Like, he's also right there.
Yeah. All right. So real quick, who is the teacher's pet on this team? Not a pleasure to teach. Who's the teacher's pet?
It's Lane Hutson, 1,000%.
It's not. It's Nick Suzuki.
I think it's Lane Hutson. I think that just he's trying to do literally everything in every single shift. I think that makes him like he shows up to the rink with an apple in his pocket. Like that's the kind of guy that I think Lane Hutson is.
Okay. Well, pleasure to teach us Lane Hutson, obviously.
For sure.
All right. Who's the problem child?
Josh Anderson. And it's not for the reasons that like we've been ripping on him in the past. It's the penalties. He has gotten on the ref's bad side for sure.
Yeah.
But it's the penalties, and that's one of the classes I want them to take next semester is Discipline 101. No team in the NHL spends more time on the penalty kill than the Montreal Canadiens. 5 minutes and 44 seconds per game is the number one in the league. They cannot continue to do that. So that's what they need to work on for the second half of the year.
And then real quick, what other classes do you want to take? I know we missed goaltending. We'll get back to that in a second. But what classes do you think what other classes do you want them to take?
Winning streaks over 3 games. That would be really fun. If they could ace that class, I'm in.
That'd be
this
good.
Team is great.
Also, I'm just willing to bet that all of them have really bad handwriting. So
as someone with terrible handwriting, I see them and respect them.
Yeah. All right, goaltending. Honestly, I'm going to give Samuel Montembeault a B+, and I'm going to give Jakub Dobeš so far an A+. I don't think that, like Samuel Montembeault had a couple of rough games because he was tired.
Dobeš moved here from another school, so we don't have much to go off of, but so far so good. I really want to see them continue to test him. Keep putting him in really difficult games and see what happens, right? Like that's the only way you're going to know what you have here. You cannot baby-proof this goalie. And they haven't. To the Canadiens, credit. They have done the opposite of that. They've given him tough matchups, and he's done nothing but excel in all of them.
Absolutely. And to that end, we are going to talk about a 2-goalie system, how the Canadiens could make one work now that Jakub Dobeš has been called up. And we're going to spend a little bit of time on that in our final segment today, and that's coming up next. I got to tell you about Rocket Money, though. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about that you were paying for twice? That's definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, but also monitors your spending and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, let's talk about goaltending. Randy Hansen brought this up and was talking about a 2-goalie system. I'm trying to think of a time where I didn't want there to be a 1A and 1B on this team, and it was quite some time ago. I would say. I think I saw it work maybe in Vancouver. Was the first time that I like really paid attention to it with interestingly enough, Roberto Luongo and Corey Crawford, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Was it no, it was Schneider, Corey Schneider.
Corey Schneider.
Yeah. It was like Corey Crawford was
He was a
the
different
name's
goalie,
kind
I
of, it's
think.
the right era. You had the right era of
I
Corey.
think Corey
He
Crawford
almost
was
got,
in Chicago.
yeah, Corey Crawford was in Chicago. Montreal guy too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he brought the cup when they won. Sorry about that.
Devastating.
Corey Schneider. And then like, they separate, obviously, like Roberto Luongo retired, and then like, Schneider didn't have a great time after leaving Toronto, but like I remember them combining for like the lowest goals in a season or whatever. And I saw that, and like it was like really funny too. They made fun of it, like thing one and thing two and all of that kind of like there were memes surrounding it.
Yeah.
But I thought that, things like that work. And then when you look around the league, like you saw, last year how Boston had a two-goalie system. It's not always sustainable, but I did want to talk about it within the context of the current Montreal Canadiens goaltending duo, particularly since Jakub Dobeš is fearless, it looks like.
Yeah. So the thing about I would say that there are 32 teams with a two-goalie system, because most of these teams have two goalies. They just choose to use them differently. My problem with the 1A, 1B scenario is that when you have a 1A, 1B, you don't have a 1. And I think that to me is where teams get into trouble. Like Boston. Boston got into trouble a few years ago in the playoffs because they couldn't figure out which one they wanted to start. And they started the wrong one, and it cost them games against Florida. That series that they lost against the Panthers. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, if the playoffs were to start today, we'd all be very concerned because it's January. But if the playoffs were to start today, Montreal has their guy. They're not starting Jakub Dobeš in the playoffs. Like, I understand how great he's been. I understand the numbers look great. He's played 3 games.
Yeah.
Like, Montembeault is the one until proven otherwise. That may change. I'm not saying that won't change. I am saying though that the two-goalie system idea is great in theory because we can just roll out a different ace goalie every night and not worry about it. But eventually all of those come crashing down, right? Like you cannot sustain having both of those. Like they needed to pay Swayman in Boston, so they had to send Allmark to Ottawa, take on Joonas Korpisalo, who's been fine. But like they didn't cash in on that the way that they thought they would have.
Yeah.
Going way back, like the Rangers with Georgiev and Lundqvist, and before that, Cam Talbot and Lundqvist. None of that stuff really works. I don't think it works long term. Maybe some team figures it out and it becomes the next market inefficiency in the National Hockey League of like having 2 really, really great goalies, figuring out how to sign both of them and keep them both under the cap, and also being able to just succeed despite the fact that probably 10, 11, 12 million dollars of your money is going to your goaltending. It's a challenge. Even in an expanding cap world, that's going to be a challenge.
I agree with you, but like for me, like the draw here is not having one goalie play upwards of 60, 70 games a year. We saw that happen with Carey Price. I don't want that, right? Like I want there to be competent enough goalie. And that's why you have a 1A and a 1B, because your B is technically your number 2.
Right.
So I think like in the scenario where it's a playoffs or a must-win game or whatever, and we always talk about riding the hot hand, blah, blah, blah. But like, I think it was really telling that Jaro Halak carried the Montreal Canadiens through an improbable, impossible run, a dream run, and then got immediately traded. And then Carey Price continued on to become one of the best goaltenders in history, right?
Right.
So, you kind of like, I feel like it's only sustainable for a short time. And I know Randy Hansen was kind of talking a little bit more like, last year they had 3 goalies and it was all complicated, and they're not doing it this year with Primo and Jakub Dobeš and blah, blah, blah. I know that that's where he was going. He's going for. But for me, like, I'm really attracted and intrigued by the idea of a 1A, 1B. But the problem is that the rest of the market, like signing Bobrovsky to the contract that Florida did, or signing, even the Rangers, like teams keep doing this thing where they're ruining it for all of the NHL and themselves, right? So if you had reasonable goaltending contracts, if you had, yes, a 1A and 1B, and the 1B would be aware of that, right? And so here's the thing. The other thing too is that like what I think the ideal scenario is that there needs to be a little bit of difference in their NHL tenures as well. Not necessarily their age, but their NHL experience. So, like that 1B, people always say, oh, he's not satisfied with being a B. He thinks he can be a 1A. Yeah, when your 1A is too old, or like another team like signs him in the offseason or whatever, that person moves into that 1A slot, right? So, because I think like one of the big things is that there's a huge discrepancy between the goaltenders that are actually good and then everyone else, right? Like there's very few mediocre goaltenders right now. You're either good or you're not good. Like that's pretty much it, right? And so we saw what happened with that in this market, but also like there's going to be 5 or 10 goalies that are making those big bucks. Is everyone else worthy of that? No, but a goalie who's like good enough to be the number one on his team can squeeze their team. So I know it's like it brings up a lot of complications, but my whole thing is that there should be one that's slightly more higher up in the pecking order than the other one, but both these goalies should be balancing. There's 82 games, right? Your 1A goalie should not be playing a number that begins with 6, 7, or 8. So it should be like 50 something.
Let's end this conversation on this question. Montreal has the only time we've seen Dobish is in back-to-back situations, right? Well, look at us. We have one coming up this weekend. Who are you starting in which game? Which one does Dobish get? Does he get the Rangers or does he get the Leafs? Both at home, so you can't play the Montembeault always gets the home game because they're both home games.
Honestly, I'm going to be really honest with you. I still play Samuel Montembeault in that Toronto game. 48 safe shutout.
It's tough to argue with. I don't disagree with you.
Saturday night.
Yeah, exactly. I think Dobish against the Rangers is a great play because that's a team that Montreal should have beaten the last time, and they just couldn't. But I agree with you. I think you have to give Montembeault the premier start, and Dobish can play a very, very effective game against the Rangers the next night. But it's an interesting question, right? Like, I think this is the way Marty will think about it too. But you never know. Let's see how the rest of the weeks, the beginning of the week starts out.
It'll be really funny if he's like, nope, I'm playing Jakub Dobish for both games.
yeah, exactly. Actually, Dobish gets all 4 this week. Sam's on vacation. He put in his PTO request. No one saw it. All right. You want to do our trivia and get out of here?
Let's do our trivia.
All right. Yesterday's question. The shootout against the Dallas Stars was the first between the Canadiens and the Stars. And there is now only one team that has not appeared in a shootout versus Montreal. I will give people partial credit for this one because, yes, the obvious answer is Utah. They have not played Utah in a shootout. But that answer is actually only half correct because they never played Arizona in one either. They never played any iteration of the Coyotes, Arizona, or Phoenix in a shootout. So Adam Glingland was first with that one, but Joe Seghetto and Kay, our friend Kay from Game Over, also got the answer. So good for you guys. All right, this question, I will admit, I do not know the answer of this one as I'm asking you it. And the reason I don't know it is who is going to score Montreal Canadiens' first ever goal in Utah? So put it in the comments, send it to us via email. Who's got the Habs' first goal in the state of Utah? And if you're putting it in, I will know what time Eastern the Canadiens scored their first goal. So do not try to trick us by putting in the answer after the fact. I will disqualify you from this question. But if you get it right, I'll shout you out on the next episode. And
not only that, you'll be disqualified from this question, and then every time you answer a trivia question, we're only going to give you half a point.
Yeah, and I'll do it through gritted teeth too. I'll be upset about it. Don't make me upset.
All right, that's a great question, Ian. Like, see, like trivia can be like real time, live.
Yeah,
in the meantime, you will see us all after the game, even though it'll be impossibly late. And as you know, we're here for you every day, your team every day. So make sure you are subscribed to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. Tell your friends, leave reviews, tell people about us. And we really, really appreciate all of that. You'll find us all over social media at Locked On Canadiens. We post on Blue Sky, we post on TikTok, we post on Instagram. Our email is lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. And obviously you can interact with us in the YouTube comments as well. We welcome that. All over social media, you'll find my co-host at Maybe It's Ian. You'll find me at The Active Stick. We want to thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you all tomorrow after that Utah game.